When you think about an adventure bike or maybe a tourer, something rugged probably comes to mind. Something that you can take on long distances and maybe even go off-road. I mean, the name Multistrada, if you translate that, literally means many roads. Something that you probably don't want to do with this bike. Think about it. It's got a dry clutch. Some people say it sounds broken, but yes, a dry clutch will make the bike go a little bit faster. However, the wear and tear of the dry clutch is going to be a whole lot more sooner than that of a normal clutch. It's got the Ducati Stradale engine, the same engine that is on the sport bike of Ducati, which is of course the Panigale. It makes 180 horsepower stock, and if you tune it properly, it can go up to almost 200 horsepower. It's as if the engineers over Ducati saw the Panigale and saw the Multistrada and thought to themselves, what if we take out that engine, which is one of the most powerful engines in the world, and we put it on our adventure bike? Does that make sense? I'm not too sure. It is one of the most excessive, over-the-top, unnecessary bikes out there. So in this episode of Beyond the Ride, I'm going to try and make sense of the insanity that is the 2024 Ducati Multistrada V4 RS. Powering this beast is a 1,103cc liquid-cooled V4 engine that puts out 180 horsepower stock at 12,250 RPM. And it's got 118 Newton meters of torque at 9,500 RPM. It's got a 6-speed transmission with an up and down quick shifter. The front suspension is an Öhlins Smart EC 2.0 electronically controlled suspension, fully adjustable of course, and it's got an upside down fork. For the rear suspension, you also do get Öhlins Smart EC 2.0 electronically controlled monoshock, which is also fully adjustable. The front stopping power is provided by dual 330mm semi-floating discs, Brembo Stylema 4-piston monoblock radial calipers with cornering ABS. While the rear is a 265mm disc with 2-piston caliper, also with cornering ABS. Both front and rear wheels are 17-inch forged aluminum. And for the tires, you get Pirelli Diablo Rosso 4. The dry weight is 227 kilograms, which is pretty impressive for an adventure bike, while a standard seat height is 840 millimeters. The fuel tank capacity is 22 liters, and don't ask about the fuel consumption because no Ducati owner actually cares. You do get a 6.5-inch TFT screen, very similar to that of the Pikes Peak and the V4S. You know what? If I was a racer, I'd actually sell my bike, but I'm not. And I'm happy with the V4. Maybe the Pikes Peak though. So before anything, I want to point out that this is not in complete stock form. The owner did change the exhaust. It comes with an Acra. They changed it to a Termi, and they also put the cover on the dry clutch. So let's talk about the aesthetics of the bike first. I mean, as an owner of the Ducati Multistrada V4, I know it's a little bit biased, but I think it's the best looking adventure or touring bike out there. I love the way the bike looks. The single-sided swing arm on this thing makes it look even better than my bike. The colorway for me is fantastic. The first time I saw it on the internet, I was so tempted to paint my bike the same colorway as this. I mean, it's just absolutely gorgeous. It's such a head turner. Every time in the past week or so that I've been using the bike, when people see me on the road, people stop me and ask me if it is a Ducati or what kind of Multistrada is it, because they're used to seeing the red Multistrada, but they're not used to seeing this. Some of the differences between this bike and my V4, well, it's the stopping power. This is the top of the line Stylema calipers, the Brembos, and you need it for this bike because, again, 180 horsepower, 180 to 200 horsepower, depends on how you tune the bike. You're gonna need excellent stopping power. Obviously, the engine is different. This is a full-on Panigale engine, sport bike engine that they put on this bike. The single-sided swing arm, of course, the suspension is a little bit different as well. That's just basic overview stuff as far as what the difference is between this bike and mine. And also, I forgot to mention, it's got a titanium subframe, which makes it significantly lighter. Now, I was stuck in horrendous Manila traffic with this bike, and I found it easier to maneuver because it's lighter than my own bike. And I was actually really pleasantly surprised getting through Manila traffic. So there are three different variants of the Multistrada, right? You have the V4, which is my bike. You have the Pikes Peak, and then you have this. And the three of them are kind of different. The V4 is really an all-rounder type of machine. It's something that is meant for going long distances. I've actually gone off-road with that bike and it handles it pretty well. The Pikes Peak is something for road use, something that you can also take on the racetrack. This is something that I would use mostly on the racetrack and sometimes take it maybe to Marilake or some twisties, but it's really not meant for going long distances like over to Kalinga or Segada or something that far. So speaking of the racetrack, that's actually the first place I tested out the RS, and it took me a while to kind of get used to it. In the first session, I was really slowing the bike down a lot because I felt so big. I felt so, the bike is quite big. You're sitting up high, you're sitting in a neutral position. And at the speeds that you're going on the track, I felt like I needed to slow down the bike a lot in order to make the turns over the Clark International Speedway. As the day progressed and I got a little bit more experience with the bike, I was able to, push it a little bit more and even take the turns a little bit more naturally. Still, it still felt a little awkward for me taking such a big bike and a tall bike at that on the racetrack. But it's something that the more I got used to it, the faster I got and the better that I rode the bike. So maybe if there was another track day that I was going to use this bike, I would get my time down a lot. But it's something that it really does do extremely well on the racetrack. And the funny thing is, or maybe not the funny thing is, but that's really the purpose of the RS, right? It's really meant for performance. Before we leave the track, I want to comment about the front tire. This is obviously a sport bike tire. And the wheel size, well, it is similar to that of the Pikes Peak, which is different from the V4. This is 17 and the V4 is 19. Now, I also did take the bike over to Marilake to, experience the twisties with it, and it felt so at home. And maybe part of it is because I'm more used to taking an adventure bike on twisties than I am on the racetrack, but this was just better than any adventure bike that I've taken on the twisties. It's so light. It felt at home, very planted. The tires had excellent grip. It was so much fun that I actually didn't want it to end. I just wanted to keep on going, to be honest with you. But of course, it's not my motorcycle. Of course, I know that I don't want to put too much wear and tear on the bike, so I did eventually had to head back down. Now, because of the racing DNA of Ducati, they probably, at least in my mind, me thinking of how they really came about the RS, is that they thought, well, the Multistrada is one of the best bikes we've ever created, and the Panigale is, well, our race bike. So what if we combine the two? And I think that's the reason why they did it, because racing and performance is really the DNA of Ducati. And they wanted to include all of that into one of their best motorcycles, which is the Multistrada V4. And I think that's the reason why they created this. Now, in all honesty, it's actually one of the best motorcycles I've ever ridden, maybe the best. But it's a little bit too much for me. Like, I would not have that much use for it because it's not like I'm a racer. It's not like I get to go to the racetrack once a month. I'm lucky if I get to go twice a year. So it's not something that I would absolutely max out or make use of, as much as, well, the bike would beg me to use. The V4 is really more my speed. I do love going far places. I do love exploring different places on a motorcycle, and that's really what the V4 is for. Maybe the Pikes Peak is something that is, the sweet spot because it's really more of an on-road bike, and the V4 can do both on-road and off-road. But this is really more of a performance-based track machine than the other two. So who is the bike for? Well, somebody, number one, who has a lot of disposable income. Perhaps a former racer who does not want to use a sport bike on a racetrack anymore and wants to be comfortable. This is perfect. This is something that he or she could take on the racetrack and maybe not even just keep pace with the other bikes out there, but perhaps even beat. I mean, again, 180 to 200 horsepower on this motorcycle, that's no joke, absolutely no joke. So it's really for somebody like that, right? Somebody who, I guess, is more of a track rider or more of a, speed demon than most people out there. And it's not for everyone, it definitely isn't. But for those people who I think this bike would attract, you know that they have racing in their blood, that's for sure. So if you're one of those people that I just described and you are drawn to this machine, well, I think it's a great buy if you could afford 2.9 million Philippine pesos. But if you can, congratulations. It really is one heck of a beast. For more information about this bike and other MCs out there, log on to www.motodeal.com.ph. I'm Jinno. Thanks for watching. Be on the ride.